Dr. Aurélie Lacassagne, who will present a paper entitled Theatre as a Space for Encounter and Dialogue. Aurélie is a full professor and the Dean of the Faculties of Human Sciences and Philosophy at St. Paul University, Ottawa, Canada. She will discuss the different elements of intercultural encounters of artists in Canada who work together while they have different and sometimes conflicting memories of the troubled past in Canada. Aurélie will also use the theatre project created in Canada called Gabrielle Doman's Wild West Show. And I tried actually to see it before this presentation. Very interesting as a case study.
I don't know if the PowerPoint behind me is going to work at some time. Using arts to foster peace through intercultural conversations and to develop mutual understanding is an integral part of human history. Among the many examples, one can mention the well-known West Eastern Divan, founded in 1999 by the Palestinian thinker Edward Said and Israeli musician Daniel Barenboim. But perhaps historically, theatre is the most political form of art. Politics is rooted in its very essence. Theatre, as a universal art form, performs social and political functions across cultures, spaces, and times. Today, I will briefly explore how theatre produced together by indigenous and settler artists can foster respectful relationships, fruitful dialogue, mutual understanding, and perhaps ultimately peace. First, I will discuss some of the key elements of intercultural theatre and the political potential of theatre to change the world, or to quote al-Kalima's mission, art and culture as tools for social transformation. These points will be illustrated with a case study of a theatre project created in Canada, the Gabrielle Doman's Wild West Show, which put together indigenous and non-indigenous artists in an effort to confront conflicting memories about the Canadian troubled past. This collaborative work aimed at deepening mutual understanding, a prerequisite before even thinking about reconciliation. And finally, I will draw some conclusions and lessons from this theatrical experience that hopefully will help artists and activists who would like to develop similar projects. So any PowerPoint behind me? Not really? Okay. Doesn't matter. Here we are. I can see that on this side. So plays can travel and plays can be translated. Translations and international touring of plays are important as first step to learn about the other, to create encounters. There is an interesting example in Bethlehem with the Al-Ahar Theatre, which organizes different sorts of events, promoting dialogue and intercultural performances between artists from all over the world. But intercultural theatre goes beyond. For Rick Knowles, intercultural theatre is a site for continuing renegotiation of cultural values and the reconstitution of individual and community identities and subject positions. In the tradition of cultural studies, theatre is understood as a site of ongoing negotiation and contestation of hegemonic discourses. In that sense, intercultural theatre is also always a theatre of resistance. And I use the word intercultural with a critical perspective. I'm conscious of the potential pitfalls of this concept. And to avoid this, I couple the concept of interculturalism with the toolbox developed by Deleuze and Guattari and by Edouard Glissant, free thinkers who were very harsh critics of the notion of the single root when it came to defining identities, and who argue for a rhizomic identity. So I studied this show, the Gabrielle Doman's Wild West Show, because of its very interesting rhizomic potential, a potential for creating identities made up of multiple roots and radically challenging this idea of a dominant single root identity. And the premise is quite simple, is that there cannot be reconciliation, without first conversation, and without real decolonization. Differences must be recognized to go beyond the usual duality found in the thought of the other. Experiences of intercultural theatre should invite us to change our ways of thinking and to give priority to what Glissant called errantry, in order to form new social and cultural identities that transcend, that go beyond identities imposed by history, written by the victors. Errantry, it's not only a matter of traveling. It's not a question of the spectator sitting off on an exotic encounter with the other. No, it is a question of opening up to the other and returning home with one's identity intact. Errantry is about letting the other into oneself, so as to form not a new oneness, but a multiplicity, an identity of the multiple to be constructed together. Which does not deny the horrors of the past, which is part of the present movement of the world. So an identity of the multiple, of the multilingual, of the multi-sensory, as Gabriel de Montsoir-Westshore proposes, so that we can begin to dream of the possibility of multiple reconciled futures. So in the middle of the work of a very important commission set up in Canada called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission in 2013, two white settler guys decided to embark on a theatre project that will end up pushing many boundaries. It was a sort of prelude to a lot of theatrical propositions responding to the Commission's recommendations for the arts organizations and artists, both indigenous and non-indigenous, to undertake collaborative projects and produce works that contribute to reconciliation. So that play was written by 10 indigenous and non-indigenous authors. The comedians and artisans were also of mixed indigenous and non-indigenous people. It was also very important for the playwrights to ensure the co-presence of languages. Therefore, there are two versions of this play. One is English dominant, one is French dominant, but in both versions there is the presence of three indigenous languages, namely the Michel, the Niyawawin, and the Lakota. There was no translation because choosing multilingualism was a very conscious choice from the artistic team, a political act to denounce the erasure of indigenous languages as well as the deceptiveness of official bilingualism. So Gabriel de Montsoir-Westshore is a sort of a choir where every voice can be heard and expressed, and every utterance invites a response from the others. In this respect, it was quite a masterful political act in keeping with the tradition of socially engaged theatre, which aimed to contribute to the city, its debates, and the emancipation of the oppressed. And it reaffirms this idea of Bertolt Brecht that theatre can change the world. This theatrical project belongs to what Eugenio Barba called the third theatre, a theatre characterized by the autonomous construction of a meaning that does not recognize the limits that the surrounding society and culture assign to the art of the stage. It's a theatre that brings artists, craftspeople from a variety of background and origins to make theatrical performance a place for exchange, a kind of barter. Pushing back the boundaries imposed by society means bringing solitudes together around a writing table, a performance space, and a theatre venue. The Wild Show was about taking over what we might call with Omi Baba a third space, a space in which oppressors and oppressed come to confront their memories of a founding event, in that case, the Métis resistance in Western Canada, with a view to beginning to think together about possible path to emancipation. One could also say that the Gabriel de Monsois show represents one of the first truly post-colonial creations in Canadian theatre. And while it borrows from the Bill Cody's Wild West show, and that seemed far less appropriate, given that it was tainted historically by its commercialization, racism, the role it played in the production and dissemination of stereotypes about First Peoples. The revival of this show in 2017 was a form of what I will call an assertive cultural reappropriation, a necessary step for colonized artists, and a difficult endeavor in which many indigenous artists have courageously embarked. All in all, during the few years, 6-7 years, this theatrical project unfolded, the collaboration between all the artists and craftspeople went fairly well, even if some of the discussions were tense, discussions that dealt with the choices that had to be made, but which also revealed some underlying problems, different theatrical traditions, power relationships that were actually more gendered than racialized. Divisions also still painful today between the Métis, particularly French-speaking and English-speaking Métis, between the Métis and the Niyawak or Cree. And also we had to ask the help of a Métis elder to ease these tensions. And collaborative projects of this kind between indigenous and non-indigenous artists required a great deal of patience, perseverance, listening, respect, and humility. Basically, you can take the 7 teachings and you have them. We learned some lessons from this experience. First is about education, to educate ourselves and to educate in general. There is too much reliance on indigenous people in the room to explain stories, protocols, ways of doing and knowing, and it adds an unnecessary burden. Ideally, the presence of an elder will be ensured throughout the creative process, and then you would avoid to ask indigenous artists to also be cultural advisors. Australia actually is very advanced in these matters. In 2002, Australia produced a very, very detailed guide entitled Protocols for Producing Australian Performing Arts. There's the same guides for media, for other sorts of cultural forms. The other idea is that a particular attention should be paid to the educative aspect of such theatrical projects for the audiences and the public in general by producing, for instance, podcast, videos, and other educational materials. The second lesson was about the importance of communities, and closely related is the fundamental question of the reception by various audiences of a proposed theoretical project. In other words, it's not just enough, it's probably not much for indigenous and settler artists to work collaboratively. What really matters is that this is an opportunity to put in the same room, audiences that otherwise will not meet. And it is the hope that these spectators coming from different walks of life and different backgrounds will experience a unique moment, will maybe engage in a conversation, and will think differently later. This is the ultimate project, the ultimate objective of intercultural dialogue, that indeed it will foster social transformation by changing misperceptions, by pushing people to think differently about the social and political issues at stake. Theatre does not change the world by itself, just by existing. It can change the world only in the relationships established with spectators. The third lesson was to go step by step, and that means conciliation first, reconciliation second. In an interview, Emily Monet, one of the actresses of the show, explained that we have to think about reconciling before we reconcile. Conciliation means discovering each other, understanding each other, listening to each other, exchanging, conversing, rubbing shoulders to succeed in reconciling different memories, cultures, and perspectives on stage. Conciliate, from the Latin conciliare, means to assemble, to come together, to be brought to an understanding, which presupposes listening, before reconciled, reconciliare, to come together. So as an intercultural endeavor, the Gabriel de Monsois show takes part in the process of decolonizing theatre and starts a conversation. This reconciliation that we talk a lot about in Canada, without knowing how to achieve it, the artists brought together in this project took the first step, recognizing, listening, understanding different national memories. In other words, they did propose a form of conciliation.